Hello, welcome to One to One. I'm Sheryl McCarthy. In a case to be decided by the Supreme Court in the coming year, Harvard University is defending its race-conscious admissions process as being good for society. The Ivies and a small group of other elite colleges and universities burnish their reputations by claiming to be leaders in promoting access to higher education for racial minorities and economically disadvantaged young people. In his new book, Poison Ivy: How Elite Colleges Divide Us, Evan Mandery, chair of the Department of Criminal Justice at John Jay College, disputes these claims. Instead of being champions of social equality and upward mobility for the disadvantaged, the real mission of elite schools, he says, is to help the wealthy and privileged stay wealthy and privileged. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
As I said, elite colleges and universities get a lot of good press for defending affirmative action for students of color, for offering full scholarships to students whose family incomes are in the modest to middle class range. They're portrayed as champions of closing the opportunity gap in higher education and trying to equalize economic opportunity in American society. But you say they are really engines of inequality.
They are, in almost every respect. They do promote, they do admit a few socioeconomically disadvantaged students, and they do provide financial aid for some of those students, but it's dwarfed by their main mission, which is to admit rich kids through a variety of pathways and to keep them rich. And I'm so glad you talk about the Supreme Court case, because it's basically certain that the Supreme Court is going to end race-based affirmative action. And I would argue it's because of Harvard's indignant insistence on continuing to do affirmative action for rich whites.
What schools in particular are we talking about? It's the Ivies and a few others, right?
Well, many colleges engage in some form of race-based affirmative action, but the race numbers in elite colleges are terrible. Harvard and Yale and Stanford have black representation that's around 15%. Basically, at every other elite college, it's around 8%, enough that some people have effectively said it's collusive. So the data is terrible and likely to only get worse after the Supreme Court overturns Bakke.
So you talked about the statistic for race. How about what percentage of their students come from families in the highest economic brackets versus those who come from the lowest economic brackets?
Right. One staggering statistic is there are 38 elite colleges in the United States where more students come from the top 1%, from families in the top 1%, than the bottom 60%.
Really?
By contrast, at CUNY, about 60% of our students come from families making less than $30,000 a year.
Okay. You talk about the role that preferences, I think they're called ALOC applicants, the role that preferences for those students play in creating this kind of inequality. I hope these numbers are right. You said that Harvard's acceptance rates for just your average applicant is only 5% out of the total number of applicants. Whereas for legacies, people who are related to Harvard alums, it's 34% of those who apply get accepted. For donor families, 42% of those who apply get accepted. For children of faculty and staff, it's 47%. And for recruited athletes, it's 86%.
Yeah, and the the most recent admit rate for Harvard's last class is actually down to 3.2%. I mean, so that's a multiplier. It's increasing your chance of getting in between 15 to 25 times. And of those athletes, 1 in 10 students at Harvard is a recruited athlete. 70% of those students are white, and approximately 3% of them are socioeconomically disadvantaged, because the overwhelming majority of these sports are available only to the rich. It's crew and squash and skiing. So what disadvantaged student has access to those sports as kids?
Now, I think most people have this perception that elite schools like Harvard and Princeton accept only the best and the brightest out of a huge pool of applicants, that all of their students have SAT scores of what's the highest, 1,600?
Yep.
That they have grade point averages of over 4.0 due to advanced placement courses, and they are brilliant and artistically talented and interesting. Is that a true perception?
I mean, there's nothing that they do that's more damaging than perpetuate the meritocracy myth. So what does best mean? They do admit many people with high SAT scores, but the SAT is basically a predictor of wealth, not college performance. High school GPA is a much stronger predictor of college performance. And they're creating pathways that are basically available only to the wealthy. And I always say this, if Harvard and Yale and Princeton said, we're not profit maximizers, but we're status aggrandizers, and we're in a race to be the first university to have $1 trillion endowment, which they'll have sometime after 2100 or so, then I would be like, okay, I don't admire you, but at least you're being honest about what you're doing. But that's not what they do. They say exactly what you said, which is that they're admitting the best of the best. And that meritocracy is a double-edged sword, because that means the students that we teach at CUNY are the worst of the worst. It's very, very hard to say that the advantaged deserve their position and not to also say that the disadvantaged deserve their position too.
Well, the ALOCs
ALDC, yeah.
who get the special preferences, I mean, do they all have 4.0 averages? Do they all have, 1,600 SAT scores?
Actually, athletes are a little bit lower. Their academic profile is generally a little bit lower, as are legacy admits. So that's when I say that they're doing affirmative action for rich whites, that's what I mean. They're giving a bonus to these people who, you can't say anything in any individual case, but overall, a group of people are getting in who are a little bit worse than the average applicants.
Okay, you went to Harvard. You're from a middle-class family from Brooklyn?
Yep, both my parents went to Brooklyn College.
Why do you think you got in?
I have some sense of this, actually. James Conant, who was the president of Harvard and who he was the administrative director of the Manhattan Project, and when the GI Bill was implemented, he turned to the SAT, effectively created the SAT as a way of identifying, because it's expanding class sizes, as a way of identifying qualified middle-class people. He actually had a scholarship, which I won. Ironically, it provided no money for me when I got in.
Really?
Yeah, but I was a token middle-class kid.
Okay. But so the impetus behind the SAT was to be more democratic.
It's right. This is like kind of a curious case of unintended
sort
consequences.
Sort of like the civil service exam.
Exactly. It's exactly the right analogy. I mean, in context, against segregated anti-Semitic schools, it's democratizing in context, but it's not democratizing today when you can take the SAT or the ACT 7 times and you can hire a tutor for $500 an hour. And of course, my students can't do that.
Do you think, every now and then, and some schools have gotten rid of, the SATs. Do you think they should be gotten rid of as
I'm glad you say that, because they don't get rid of them. So test optional is not the same as no tests. So no tests would actually be better, because that would level the playing field. But when they say test optional, the affluent students, the affluent white students, are still going to submit their SAT scores, because that's the way they kind of paper over their lower GPA, right? The SAT is a way to let in kids who wouldn't get in solely on the basis of their GPA. And here's a democratizing thing that Harvard could do. Tell me you don't think that this would be a really, really deserving and excellent class. They could have a lottery among valedictorians in the United States and admit, 1,600 to the class. You don't think those people would be super smart, but they would be diverse, because now you'd be randomly selecting among American school districts. Unfortunately, Exeter and Andover and Groton wouldn't still get in their 10 graduates a year.
And they talk about, doing similar things for the elite high schools in New York City. They haven't gone to doing that, but people talked about it.
Right. So and this is an important case. The SHS. My dad was principal of Brooklyn Tech. He went to Brooklyn Tech. He still works there. So I've been living this my whole life. At least what they do is better in this sense. At least there's one metric. This is the SHSAT. You get in based on your score. I've never heard of somebody gaming that system. Bill de Blasio's son went to Tech. He didn't go to Stuyvesant. He didn't call in a favor. And that single metric is problematic in some ways, just like the SAT, but at least it's not filled with nepotism and cronyism, and if you gave a lot of money to Stuyvesant, I can get your kid in.
So, I mean, we've seen the great lengths that wealthy parents will go through to try to get their kids into these schools. I mean, the recent
Varsity Blues.
School admissions scandal. And you say that's because the real goal of these colleges is to take children of the super wealthy and ensure that they remain super wealthy.
My reaction to
sort of you say it's sort of insurance.
Yeah, it's insurance against downward mobility, and it's, you know, these colleges are basically the exclusive promoter of access to jobs at like Goldman Sachs and McKinsey. But my reaction to Varsity Blues, I mean, obviously it's terrible that people try to defraud the system, but why is there a sailing team in the first place? Does anybody go to Harvard or Yale or Princeton because they have a good sailing team? Why was that a pathway that could be exploited?
You say that among the supervillains in this whole process are the professional college advisors. Why?
Well, I feel like the odds are tilted in favor of the rich from the start, right? We know that educational outcomes and life outcomes for kids start to diverge almost from birth. And that's access to networks and access to resources. And then at the end of that process, so now I'm 17 or 18 years old, and I've already had a lifetime of advantage. Here are these people, the overwhelming majority of whom used to work in the admissions offices of these colleges, and they're going to give me advice, and worse still, write my college essay or help me write my college essay. And I mean, there's such easy steps that the colleges could implement. So why not have kids write their college essay while sitting for the SAT? That would level the playing field. And when their failure to do it makes it seem like admitting the rich isn't like a byproduct of the system, but it's the whole point.
Another one of your targets is the early admissions process. Why?
Well, early admissions is a disaster. So in an efficient market, I interview, and I tell in the book, I interviewed Al Roth, who's a Nobel Prize winning economist who designs markets. You're not supposed to need a guide to go through the system. But if you're trying, and I hope this isn't what people take away from our interview or a conversation, if you're really trying to maximize your kid's chance of getting into an elite college, you really should fire the early admissions bullet. About 2/3 of classes at elite colleges are filled through the early admissions games. And I described this in the book.
2/3?
Oh, it's shocking. I mean, it's grown exponentially since we went to college.
How does that work? I mean, is it like you agree, if they admit you early, you agree to go there?
Correct.
As opposed
there's
to some
two pathways.
School?
There's non-binding and there's binding, but many of them are admitting it binding. And the reason they do it is because when we went to college, it was very hard to apply to 20 colleges. So we put a lot of time into our essay, and our essay sent a very strong signal that we were going to go to this place. Now I click a button and I send off, thanks to the college, then I send off my application to 20 different schools, and the schools don't know who's going to actually matriculate.
Because they all use the same application.
Correct, it's the common application.
So a lot more people are applying to a lot more schools.
That's the main reason why admission rates are down so much, is there's just a greater quantity of applications.
Okay, so there's the bias in front of wealthy white students in the admissions process. You say that, and once they're there, once they are enrolled, the elite schools continue to promote inequality by the careers that they steer students into.
I wasn't a zealot when I started this process. I was a skeptic when I really started diving into the data on this. And I'm not an absolutist about this. So if Harvard and Yale admitted a bunch of rich white kids and they steered them into do-gooder careers, I would actually think that was mitigating. So about 2% of Harvard graduates go into teaching, 60% go into management consulting, investment banking, or the tech sector. You know what the numbers are at CUNY? Depending how you define public service, 2/3 to 3/4 of John Jay graduates go into public service. And I don't need to tell you this. If you stop a cop on the street, or you talk to a teacher, or you talk to a firefighter, chances are better than not that they went to one of the CUNY colleges.
Right. If I'm a black student from a poor family who manages to get into Princeton or Harvard, probably 10 years after I graduate, I'm going to be doing pretty well.
For sure. I mean, the data is very positive about the impact, that economic impact these colleges have on poor students.
But you have to get in first.
Right, which is threading, the eye of a needle.
So the question is, how well do the elite schools perform in terms of moving students from the bottom economic level to the top economic level?
Right. So they're really, really good. So I talk a lot in the book about Raj Chetty and John Friedman. It's kind of the biggest study of college and economic outcomes in America. And their key statistic is mobility rate, which is the product of the number of poor students you let in, students from the bottom income quintile, multiplied by success at promoting them to the top income quintile. And the Ivy League colleges have a really, really high success rate. They just let in very, very few poor students. In the overall ranking of mobility rate of the top 12 colleges in the United States, 8 are at CUNY. We are the engines of economic mobility in the United States, CUNY and public colleges like us.
How about public colleges, like University in California? Berkeley seems to be kind of
right. Depends how selective you want to be about it. If you just pull out Berkeley, not so much, but the University of California system on the whole is terrific. The California tech system is terrific. So, but if you single out like University of Virginia, actually University of Virginia looks really, really bad by a lot of these metrics.
Okay. Historically black colleges.
Well, I see historically black colleges as forces for good. They're socioeconomically diverse, and they are, serving a population that was, for most of American history, couldn't attend college at all. So I think that's a public good. And how about Harvard sends $1 billion of its endowment to Howard? That would be an act of charity that I think would be good.
I grew up in Birmingham, Alabama, where the public schools were totally segregated when I was growing up. Most of my black friends went to historically black colleges. And in addition to having a lot more fun than those of us who went to,
right.
Colleges at that time. But they also, that you get a degree from Fisk or Spelman, and then you go to graduate school, perhaps, to an Ivy League university, which seemed to work pretty well.
It does, if you can get yourself to graduate school. I want to underscore two things that you said that I think people really need to understand. By the end of the late 1960s, schools in the South were de facto segregated.
Right.
Okay? So I don't think people get this. There's an index of desegregation by two famous sociologists, which is the most minimal condition of desegregation. One white student in a school, one black student in a school. In Alabama, 99% of schools were still segregated. And it's only once busing starts that things start to change. And actually there was...
In the
70s. And there is some progress in the South. By the way, it's the northern liberals that are most resistant to busing because they don't want to sacrifice any of their advantage. And a second thing I want to say is I do think, if somebody asks me where am I going to be happy? So, a lot of my book is stories of students, and there's this wonderful woman, who I love, and she just started at Northeastern Law School. And I was like, well, that's great because it's going to change your life, but you're not going to like it because you're going to be around a lot of rich kids for the first time. And, in fact, it's very challenging for her. But how about better than this? We make these colleges diverse spaces so that you don't face that trade-off, so you can go and have fun and get the economic advantage, and we can diversify access to all of these spaces like, the management committee at Goldman Sachs, which shapes very, very important public policy and is not diverse in any significant sense.
If the students attending the elite schools are overwhelmingly wealthy, white, and from the suburbs, the argument tends to be that they're that way because of racial inequity that exists in society, because of racial discrimination, because of racially segregated neighborhoods, poorly performing high schools, and that, so you have a lot of students out there that can't meet Harvard or Princeton's high academic standards. And it's the society that's at fault and not the elite schools. Conversely, you argue that society looks the way it does because elite colleges look the way they do.
Yeah, I think the causal chain is much more reversed than anybody cares to admit. the standard life course for an upper middle class white family is you live in the city until you have kids, and then you either send your kid to private school or you move to a suburb. And what are you chasing? You're chasing access to resources, lots of AP courses, extracurriculars, and participation in sports, like lacrosse and crew. And that's because these colleges value those things arbitrarily. And I want to say how arbitrary it is. I've taught at John Jay now for 23 years. I teach a lot of honor students and a lot of Macaulay students. Let me tell you, every one of those students could do the work at Harvard, Yale, or Princeton. So the idea that they're admitting the only students who can do the work is a total fabrication.
Do elite colleges and universities promote any kind of good for society? And should they be doing more good?
Well, the second one is easy.
Well, that's easy.
Yeah. I'm pretty skeptical right now. I know, I'm careful to put the research function to a side. I do think research is a public good. But these colleges get massive amounts of federal funding. So Harvard and Stanford get about $1 billion a year in federal grant funding. And if they wanted to be research shops, they could run like the Rockefeller Foundation. There's a model for that. But they run colleges, and colleges are sort of supposed to be about educating a diverse group of people in a diverse classroom, providing access to all kinds of people, and they fail resoundingly at that mission.
So, what could these elite schools do to promote socioeconomic equality in society? I think you talk about 1% solutions.
Yeah, I don't think there's any, one size fits all solution, but I think it's really hard for people to have a sense of big numbers, and let me just give one number. Harvard has an endowment of $52 billion a year, okay? And Harvard, like Yale, and they all basically follow the same model. They draw down 4.5% of their endowment every year. They take that out. What does the world look like if they took 5.5% out? Now, first of all, to be clear, their endowment would continue to grow massively. They'd still make it to $1 trillion. It would just take them a little bit longer. But what would $500 million look like? Well, John Jay's operating budget is about $200 million a year. So they could run 2 to 3 colleges just dedicated to expanding opportunity. Imagine Harvard Detroit. How does that sound?
Okay. So you talk about really increasing their enrollments.
I think it's like the most politically feasible thing to happen, right? Because it's very hard for them to go to their cronies at prep schools and say, oh, hey, Andover, we're not going to let in so many people anymore. But what they could do is they could dilute their interest. And, class sizes haven't changed at any of these colleges in 50 years, even though the population of America has doubled.
You also say something you mentioned before, adopt top class rank policies. If wherever high school you came from, if you're in the top ranks, we'll be more likely to let you in, as opposed to using the SAT scores.
Right. The University of Texas system adopted that. Actually, there was a court ruling that looked like it was going to make affirmative action unconstitutional. It was only because Antonin Scalia died that there was a reprieve until today. And in the wake of that initial ruling, they implemented a policy by which the top 7% of everybody from their high school class gets to go in. And it dramatically increased diversity. And, like I said to you before, it's just impossible to imagine that, imagine a lottery among the top 1 or 2 people in every high school class in America. That wouldn't be a really, really interesting and smart group of people. There'd be lots of athletes in the bunch, and they'd be very, very diverse.
Would you get rid of the special preferences for legacies, children of donors, athletes, children of faculty? Would you get rid of those?
In a second, when I talk about this, I'm like, I don't know what perfect justice looks like. A lot of people debate affirmative action, and I see arguments pro and con, but I know what injustice is. I know that giving preference to rich white people who have been the beneficiaries of the system for centuries, I know that's unjust. So we should stop doing that, and now we can fight about who deserves the lion's share of the opportunity that we've created.
You've got about 2 minutes. We've got these lawsuits against Harvard that have been heard by the Supreme Court. There's going to be some kind of decision probably in the spring. What will happen if the Supreme Court decides that schools can't use race in admissions anymore?
Well, I don't know. I'm sure that the Supreme Court is going to end race-based affirmative action. And I'm going to say that that's a tragedy, because I do know who should be eligible to benefit from affirmative action, which is the descendants of slaves. And all of these colleges benefited directly or indirectly from slave labor. And people who are the victims of segregatory residential practices like redlining, and all of these colleges engaged in those practices too. So unfortunately, that baby is going to get thrown out with the bathwater when the Supreme Court says no to all of this. And I presume, except that the wealthiest colleges, race diversity numbers will drop. It's a tragedy.
What do you want people to take away from this book?
I always say that my emotional starting point for this is that the story that rich white people tell about poor college students of color is that they are where they are because they're lazy and stupid, and it's the exact opposite. They're smart and they're the most hardworking people that I've ever seen in my life, and we need to create opportunities for them to succeed the same as everybody who's born into a family of privilege.
Well, it's a very, very interesting book, and there's so many aspects to it. Unfortunately, we're out of time. I'd like to thank Evan Mandery, Chair of the Department of Criminal Justice at John Jay College and author of Poison Ivy: How Elite Colleges Divide Us, for joining me today. To learn about our upcoming shows, you can follow us on Twitter at 1-to-1 CUNY TV. For the City University of New York and 1-to-1, I'm Sheryl McCarthy.